Hi guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back with another video. Today's video, we are using some new products from Gina K Designs. Well, the stamp set is new. The stencil is old, but it's still great. And so the stamp set is the Fabulous Flamingos. It's got lots of really kind of like fun tropical leaves and hibiscus and these cute little flamingos. And then I am also using the Sassy Stripes stencil. I'm a sucker for stripes. I think they're classic. But anywho, so I'm going to be doing two different kind of cards today. One is more of like a quick scene. It's a quick scene, yeah. And then the other one is just this cute little floral. And in both cases, we are going to be using a colored outline. That's kind of the focus of today's video, which might sound like a weird thing to focus on. Honestly, I'm don't know that I would ever go looking for a video that showed me when to use a colored outline, but I did want to show you kind of how effective that they can be in your card design. So here, all I am doing is I just needed their tushies. I just needed their tushies masked. So I just cut two little pieces of Eclipse masking tape so that I could trim those out. And I'm not even going to trim them out in their entirety. I'm just going to trim out their rear ends so that I don't stamp my leaves over them. So when we're getting little Jelly Bean ready for her bath, I will say, you ready to go wash your tushy? And, now she's starting to pick up on words and stuff. So, of course, out of all the words that we say any other time of the day, the one that she tries to say is tushy. It's the most adorable thing. It's her little tushy. So, anywho, I wanted to do kind of like this little frame with these tropical leaves as if we were looking in on these two little flamingos kind of standing on a beach. And but I didn't want to have to cut masks for everything. And so I stamped them all at one time in one corner, and then I'm going to flip my cardstock and stamp them in the other corner. Now, because I'm stamping them all at one time, there is a lot of gapping in between them, and that's okay. That's where the colored outline's gonna come in. So I did the bottom right and the top left, and then I moved my card to the top right, and now I'm going to do the bottom left and the top right. I did feel like there was a little bit of empty space after I stamped these. So I did go in with the smallest, I guess it's like a palm, little tiny palm, the one in the middle, the more rounded palm. And I did stamp that a second time just to fill in a little bit more space in my border. I guess that's what we'll call it, a border. And I did overstamp just barely one of the other ones, but I think by the time it got colored, it wasn't even noticeable, so I didn't worry about it. So this is me stamping the extra palm. And then from there, we will get into, well, we'll stamp the flower, of course, for the second card. And then we'll get into the stenciling and then the coloring. So I'm recently back. I went to Creativation and I ran the Make It table, like the make and takes, that's what they're called, for Picket Fence, which was super fun because I got to meet them in real life. And so I think I feel very strange doing my voiceover because I feel like I'm still in like in-person teacher mode, so I don't feel like I sound very natural right now, but you're just repeating the same thing over and over again when you're doing the make and takes. So yeah, anyway, so here, this is my little stamp wheel. I am still using this to hold down my stencils. It's amazing. I did a whole video review if you missed that. But let's talk about Gina's release. So there's lots of good stuff. You guys know she always does her release in the evening, and that is live now. When this video goes live, it will be live, so I will link it below so you can go over and kind of check out her whole release. I did pick out a couple of ink colors. For Gina's, for the most part, I just have the cubes, not the full size. The amalgam ink, obviously, what I stamped in, which is safe for alcohol markers, and it's waterproof. It's just a good ink. You can use that with alcohol markers and a bunch of other stuff. But then her her premium dye inks. That's what I'm ink blending with. And so I chose to go in with some Ocean Mist for this one. And I'm just going around the edges. Again, I have not masked anything. I'm just going right over these leaves because I didn't want to take the time to do it. So I think a lot of times people look at one layer cards and they're like, holy smokes, that's a lot of work to do all that masking. But sometimes you can fake it, y'all. You don't even need to mask. So once I did the stenciling, and that's just to add some extra interest to our scene, I did go back in with that Ocean Mist and just kind of go around the edges to make them a little bit darker because we're trying to create a little bit more weight with the leaves without having to stamp more leaves and actually have to mask them. So that is really... When would you add a color to outline? Oftentimes, it is when you want to add weight to an image that maybe is a little bit more dainty or fragile, or in this case with the border, we want to make it look fuller than it is. So for the hibiscus floral background, I went in again, I'm using the Ocean Mist, and I am just going around the edges because honestly, I'm going to cut out the flower like the cardstock that the flowers on. I'm just going to trim it down and pop the whole piece up. So I don't really need to take the time to do the center, but whatever your card design is, you could, whatever works for you. I did do a different one that I didn't end up liking. And that's just, sometimes that just happens in card making. But I did do it and like with the sections in the middle, and it was totally fine. The stamp or the stencil held on the stamp wheel. So now I'm going to go back in and I'm just going to readjust the stencil just a little bit to kind of get like a double line. Again, this is just going to give us a different look, kind of stretch our supplies. And so I just scooted it kind of like down and to the left a little bit so that I had some overlapping between the two colors. This would be super fun, to create kind of like a third color, but I am using colors that are too similar to each other. I'm using a tranquil teal. Why do I want to say it like that? Tranquil teal. I have no idea why my enunciation is not right. Actually, yes, I kind of do, which is a longer story time for another time. So another video, but I will tell you that I spent a lot of time with my friend Jen, and Jen is from England. And so she speaks very British and she's contagious. And I just couldn't stop myself from picking up her words. And so that I do know why my speech pattern is a little bit crazy right now. And it's because, in fact, on the way home, Eric asked me, like, how British did you get while you were gone? And I was like, I don't really know the answer. This part I solely left in just to show you how nice it cleans up. That was it. That's the whole purpose. So now we're going to move on to the coloring. If you saw my Magnolia card that I did recently, where I colored the die cuts, this is the same color combination. I already had it on my desk and it was perfect for my little flamingos, so I just embraced it. I am going in, somebody did ask me at Creativation, Carrie. She said, I've noticed in your videos you've been starting with your darkest color more versus, how you used to color with your lightest and then go out to your darkest and darkest back into your lightest. And she is correct. I have been starting with my darker color more. And some of that is a little bit of a leftover compensation from the Olo markers because they have that free-flowing ink. You don't need to put down as many layers to get a good blend. And if you put down too many layers, you can get quite a bit of bleeding. So I had, like with the Olo markers, I have to start with my darkest marker. But I think part of it just has to come with being more confident in my coloring and knowing where the shadows go and not needing the... Because if you've watched my channel for a while, you know that I've said I'm very heavy-handed. And so typically whatever color I start with first is the color that you see the most of, which is why I've always started with my lightest color, lightest to darkest, darkest to lightest. And that has worked for me for years and years. But now I feel like I'm a little bit more confident with my coloring, and I am confident that I'm not going to go too dark. And in cases like this, like with these flamingos, if I went too dark, it would not have mattered because my lights are so light. They're going to bleach out quite a bit of that darkness. So I have the opportunity to kind of lighten it up if I get too heavy handed. But especially if you're a beginner colorist with alcohol markers, I would still recommend starting with your lightest color, working out to your darkest, and then your darkest back into your lightest. The other reason why lately I've been starting with my darker color more, and you guys know we keep it real here, and I just try to be as transparent as possible, it doesn't take as long. And I've been rushing because I have so much traveling. And so I've been trying to find ways without cutting down on the amount of videos that I'm doing or the quality of my work. I've been trying to find ways to kind of save time. And that's one of the ways that I can do it, by not having to color the image essentially twice. It does cut down on the amount of time it takes me. So that's another reason why. So here I'm just going to go in and I'm going to put in a little ground so they're not just floating in the middle area. And so I chose some cooler browns. Normally I would gravitate more towards warmer browns. That's just my preference. But I chose to go with cooler ones because I felt like they matched the card better, like the colors I was already using. And so I went with the E70 family, which is a pretty cool brown. Not like cool, rad, awesome. What are even words now today that describe? How do you say that? How do you say cool today without sounding like you were born in the 80s? I don't know. I don't know the answer. But yeah, anyway, they're on the cooler side of the color wheel. Is that maybe a different way to say it? I'm not sure. But so I just did some little squiggles, and literally I just did little squiggles. You watched me just do it. And so that it wasn't super blocky, because I really just want to give them something to stand on. And then I chose a couple of different greens and blue greens to go in and do my leaves. And these, because they're smaller and they're maybe a bit more fine lined, I didn't want to go in with a ton of colors and kind of just blow them out, which honestly, some of the lines I still did. I'm just being honest with you. Some of them, they were so fine. It did take me a second to kind of get in there with my nib and not have them be all over the place, which is another thing a color outline is great for, covering your mistakes. It's pretty fabulous for that. But so I just chose two colors. I chose a pretty dark and then more of a mid-tone light. And because we don't have much real estate here, they will blend pretty nicely together without us really having to do a ton of work, just because there is it's just such a small area to color. Smaller images are always easier to get blending. It is harder to maintain detail with smaller images, but that's okay. In this case, we're just kind of creating this border where we want a lot of different colors. And so that's all I'm doing, is just a lot of dark in the center or where they come out from their stems, and then lighter as it goes out and where they would catch more light. So I used the yellow greens in the first one, the blue greens here, and then I'm going to use like more of a true green for this kind of, is it a monstera leaf? It looks like a monstera to me. And I have one in my kitchen, so I feel like maybe I know what I'm saying. All other types of plants, probably not so much. But so I'm just putting that down, the darkest color, and then I'll blend it out with the lightest. And then I'm not going to show you the coloring of all of them because I did all of them exactly the same. So once we're done coloring here, then we'll move on to the color outline portion for this card. And for that, because I used the Ocean Mist, which is very clearly a beautiful blue-green color, I chose to do my outlining in a BG. So they're all colored. And you can see that even adding the color does make them, give them more weight. But we're going to give them even more weight and kind of blend in our edges by going in with this BG75. You don't have to outline everything when you're doing a color outline, and especially not in this case. But as you can see, as we're adding the outline around each one of these leaves, it is definitely giving it more weight and making it a more solid image. And that's going to really help kind of fill in this canopy look that we're going for of this leaf borders. What are my dogs barking at? Nobody knows. Nope, nobody knows. Ever. Nobody knows. No idea. So anywho, this will just kind of give it that more weight and fill in the border pretty nicely. And you can see for the lightest area on the outside where the stencil kind of blends to white, I'm not going over that. I'm just kind of flicking my color out towards there, and then I'm letting those edges be free because I really just want the weight around the edges. That's where I want it to be the most, like the darkest or the heaviest, because they're stamped off frame. So we have to give the illusion that they continue outside of just the picture that we can see. And so that little bit of, color outline is going to help me do that. Here I realize that I forgot to fill in the lightest color. I forgot to fill in the lightest color for this little palm front, but it's all right. We just hit it on our way back through. So here again, just, flicking that color outside the edges, and it's giving us that, weight. So it really looks like there is this canopy, but we didn't have to stamp continuously. We didn't have to mask it and stamp over top of it. We're able to achieve that look just by adding a little bit of this colored outline to the background and giving it a fuller look. So now that that's done, we're going to move on to coloring the hibiscus. This is a beautiful flower. And traditionally they're pretty bright, but I knew that the card that I just did was not as bright, and I like them to go together when I photograph cards together. Very matchy around here. And so the coloring of the hibiscus, not the shading or applying the color, that was not the problem. It was getting a color that I was going to be happy with. So you'll see here, we're going to do a ton of color glazing and kind of reworking it. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're like, oh, I don't really love this color, but I've spent all this time coloring it, and you have a tendency to just pitch, just bin it. There's Jen coming out again. To just put it in the trash. You can save it. You don't have to throw it away. You put in a lot of time and work into it, and you can save it with color glazing. Even if you don't like the color, don't feel like you have to, just give up on it. Persevere. You can do it. I have faith in you. So for these leaves, I colored them exactly the same way, except for this time we're using a 3-color blend. So I started with my darkest color in the centers, and then, this center of the prongs for the leaves. And then I blended that out with my mid-tone, and then I went in and kind of covered everything over with my lightest color to get a good blend. And then I was good with the leaves, but the leaves have so much detail in them, and obviously coloring them in, makes them more solid, heavier. But there's so much detail in them that they are a bit thinner, or they look a bit more fragile. And so, this is my focal point. This is the only image on my card. So in order to kind of bolster that up and give it some more weight in my card design, this is where the outline is going to come in for this one. And it's going to be tremendously helpful to help it make those colors pop off the page, and to make it just a bit heavier, so that it can really stand up as a focal point. So I originally chose some yellows with yellow oranges, and I didn't love it. I just didn't love it. And that's okay. So you're going to add shadows any places where 2 points meet, and any point where one object lays on top of another. And in addition to that, I also added little triangles of shading where the flowers dipped in, because hibiscus are typically pretty ruffly. They have those kind of ruffled edges. And so in order to create that dimension and that texture in the flower, we have to put in those little triangles of color to show where the valleys are, and, leave those highlight areas for the peaks, so you can really see the dimension in the flower. That might have been one of my issues with the yellow. Honestly, I might just not have had enough contrast, and I just didn't really love it. And hey, that's all right. Sometimes, it shakes out like that. So here, I'm on to my lightest color. I originally thought my lightest color was going to be a YO2. It did not end up being that way. It ended up being a YO3, or a Y13. And it just wasn't poppy enough. It just wasn't happening for me. And so my first thought was to glaze it, and I went in with a light pink from the Flamingos. This is the R11. This was not bright enough to even really make a difference. So then I went in and I figured I would color in my center. I used the same browns that I used the ground for in the flamingo card. This was a mistake. I feel like I should have made it more of a golden yellow, but we fix that later anyway. So then I went in, now this is the R32, which is the darkest color from the flamingos, and I was really liking this a lot better. But the problem was, once I put it down, I made it completely flat. There's no dimension there. So now I'm going back in, and I was like, well, maybe I'll make it more of a red color. So I'm going back in and I'm doing those same shadows with an R29. And as soon as I put the red down, I immediately despised it with the green leaves. So now I changed it to pink. I told you guys it was a long journey. So because an R29, that 9 ends in it, I know that I can blend that out with an RV09 because those two colors are the same as far as the end number. And that's really what you want to look for when you're blending color families, different color families. And so I went in with an RV09 and went over top of that. And then I went in with an RV04 and I was much, much happier with the way that that was looking. And then, so then I went back to that R32 that I already knew that I liked it that way, but I liked it as a highlight color. And I just needed to maintain that dimension. Plus it did give me the little, like some more orange still kind of peeked through that R32, and I thought it was super pretty. I was happy with it in the end, but you can see how many colors I put over top of this and how many times I've reworked it. So please don't put it in the trash if you spend time on it. Just try the color glazing. Worst case scenario, it still ends up being put in the trash. But best case scenario, you can save it. And most of the time I would venture to say that you can. So here, this is the last color, and then I did trim this piece down. So instead of being a cardstock front, which is 5.5 by 4.25, I trimmed it down to 4.5 by 3.25. So I just cut an inch off. And then now here we're going in with the outline. And I chose, this time I'm going to do two colors. So the BG45 is what I'm outlining in now. And you can see immediately how much more of an impact these leaves have once we fill in those white gaps in between. So it just gives the focal point that much more like kind of punch or pow. And so I'm going to outline this whole thing in the BG45. I don't really like a stark outline. Everybody's different, so you do whatever works for you. But I like when my color outline is a bit softer. So after I did the BG45, I went in with a BG11, which is a much lighter blue-green. And then I went right over that, right over the BG45 that I already had there. I overlapped the colors so that they would blend together. And then this, it's a little less jarring is all. So this BG11, since it is a little bit lighter, it's a little bit nicer next to the white. And then those are both done. So I'm going to, I held it up here for you instead of zooming in my camera. Why? I don't know. We're going to stamp the sentiments, and both of the sentiments come from this fabulous flamingos set. And one says sending you sunshine and the other says have a sunny day. I just thought they were super cute. So yeah, so for a colored outline, you just to quickly recap, you want to use it anytime you want to make your focal point have some more kind of punch or pow or impact, or you want to use it when you're trying to add weight to something. So just when you're trying to make something look heavier or look fuller, that's a great time to add a colored outline as well. Here I went back in with that BG11 because my flamingos are sitting on a mostly white area. I used the lighter color to outline them, and it kind of pushes that pink forward and really ties in the background, which I totally love. So if you're making a card and you feel like maybe something is missing, and you would like to add a little bit of something else, try a colored outline and you might surprise yourself with how much you enjoy it. I know Kathy Rakusin, who is an amazing colorist, when she is coloring, she adds a light blue outline to quite a bit of her images just to help them pop. So here I am adding a bit of foam behind my stamped and colored panel, and then I'm going to line that up right over top of my stenciled background. And you can see how nice, this focal point is, with the little outline. It matches our background. And then I'm going to go in with a bit of white gel pen to put in some highlights on my flower. These are going to be pretty stark highlights because gel pens are opaque, but I don't mind them. I also I also put some white dots onto the stamen of the hibiscus. I almost called it a hydrangea. Why do I keep calling every flower a hydrangea? I don't know. I do not know. Then I also added a couple of white dots just to the monstera leaves in the other one, just to kind of break up that border a little bit. And I also added some white highlights to my flamingos. To help my flamingos stand out a little bit more, I added some shimmer, but also just because I like shimmer. If you don't like shimmer, that's fine. You can do whatever you want to do, but I always recommend shimmer. And then I added that to the flower as well. And then that's it. That's the whole thing. So I look forward to sharing with you guys my travel stories as well as my home stories soon when we have a little bit more time to cover more things. But so that's it. I hope it's super helpful to you. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.